all Dad and my grandpa and his sons, which was 4 boys, all worked at the mines. There was one mine right downtown Norwalton, and that's where the explosion occurred. And this one picture we have, and I have several pictures of the mines where people were there. And a picture of the morgue where they laid out, at the school building where they laid out the bodies and everything. But you want to go ahead and talk about what happened to Dad? Dad was the only one of the boys that got hurt real bad. The other ones got out okay. But Dad had a big fall on him, and so they thought he died, and they carried him out and laid him out with the dead and he laid there for several hours with the dead waiting for Grandpa or one of his brothers or Grandma to come and identify his body. Over the time Grandma got there to identify his body, well, she kneeled down to give him a kiss and brushed the coal dust off his face, and she said he's not dead, he's still alive. So they took him out of the morgue then and took him to the hospital and brought him around 6 weeks unconscious. But he lost the use of one arm because it crushed that muscle in his one arm, but they saved his arm. Dr. Duncan was a very good doctor back in them days, and they was going to cut his arm off. That was usually the quick thing they did the whole day. You know, something was wrong with him, cut the limb off, and you don't have to worry about it no more. Mm-hmm. And Dr. Duncan said, no, I can save his arm. And they said, well, you think you can do it? He said, I'll save it. So he went in there several times taking pieces of bones out and chips out of his arm, you know, got the infection all cleared up, and he got the use of his arm as far as limber. He didn't have any strength in it because he didn't have the muscle, but he had the strength to move his arm, whatever. And it was a handicap to him, but that handicap carried him on into the World War I, which back in World War I, they drafted everybody went to the Army, even if he was 4F, you know. So Dad was 4F, but they still made him go to the Army, and they would send him to West Virginia to work in an ammunition factory, building shells for World War I, but he never had to go overseas because of his arm. So it was the way it turned out. And then after that, it was several years went by, and Dad tried other things, but then he finally went back to the coal mines again in Heron. They moved to Heron. And then they went to Consolidated Coal, which was on the east side of Heron.
Do you know what year they moved to Heron?
Approximately about 1910 or 11, somewhere in there. When they moved to Heron, oh no, that was they moved to Heron total. I'm not sure of the exact date. The giant explosion was in 1914. Then the war came along, so they didn't move to Heron until it would have been in the 20s, early 20s probably.
Okay.
I'd say somewhere around 19, 20 or 21, somewhere in there.
The 1910 was when they moved to Royalton?
Yeah.
Okay.
And moved to Heron, and went to Heron, and Grandpa built a home on South 10th Street. And then my dad built the house on the corner. He built it off second house lot off the corner. And my dad went and built a house for himself because he still hadn't got married yet. But he made enough money in coal mines and saved it, living at home, and saved his money and paid $300 and had him a house built on the corner. And that was right behind where the church is at now, on the corner, just east of the church.
So his house and property cost $300?
Yeah, $300. No, $300 for the house.
For the house?
He'd already bought the lot.
Okay.
And him and Grandpa put a partial basement under the house. They went and dug it out by hand, poured the concrete and everything, mixed the concrete, poured it by hand and everything, and then he contracted a carpenter contract then for $300 to come put the house up, which in them days it was only 4 walls, no roof. You know, you didn't have anything fancy, no electricity, no plumbing within the house or anything like that. You know.
Just the basic frame.
That's the way the Hardcastle got started in Heron, Illinois.
And they had an outhouse too in the back.
Yeah, oh yeah, there was an outhouse with a grape arbor running all the way from the house out to the outhouse. That's what everybody had a grape arbor. Of course, we didn't.
So what is that?
The grape arbor,
Yeah.
that's just a set poles from the house out. It was sort of like, and then they arched it to where you walk through it, going from the house to the outhouse, and grew grapes on this, these all these vines you walked under. And now most of the Italians in there, they grew grapes and made wine. Dad only made grape juice. He just took the squeeze, we had a crusher, crushed them out, a bottler to bottle the bottles, and we took the juice and made grape juice out of it. Of course, it was ferment, in the bottles even. And you had to keep them cool, otherwise they would explode, And it was, that's some of the early things we did back in days when I was real little then, sometime after 1930.
Mm-hmm.
But we had the grape arbor, we had things, outbuildings, we had a barn behind the house. Dad later on, when he tore Grandpa's house down, took that lumber and built a barn behind the house, a small barn. It's kept a cow and chickens. That's all we had, just one cow and some chickens. And we had our own milk with our own eggs, kept them best way we could in the well. No refrigeration of any kind.
You had water well?
Yeah, just a water well.
Okay.
And we had to run the water up in a bucket, into the house, and carry the water onto the porch,
This would be the way life was in the 30s, right?
Yeah. So that's the way it was until.
Did he hold his job through the 30s during the Depression?
Did he what?
Did he hold his job at the mines?
Oh yeah, it was quite comical in Heron because Heron had so many mines. They had, I think there was something around a dozen mines, within hearing distance of Heron, and all the way around. Because everybody walked to work. Nobody had any automobiles or anything, so they walked to work. So you lived close to the mine so you could walk. Dad walked from South 10th Street to number 7, which was on the east side, about a mile every day. He walked across there, him and everybody else, they just like a string, people going back, going in, and some coming out and going back.
Now, number 7 was it on Stotler?
It was at the end of Monroe Street, at the east end of Monroe, run into the mine property.
East end of Monroe. I know Monroe's downtown, right?
Yeah, runs all the way through the center of town, east and west.
And was the mine downtown?
No, the mines was at
Probably
the
everybody
end.
but me knows where that mine was.
Yeah, the mine was right at the east end of Monroe.
Okay.
And they had what they called the mine whistles, or they had whistles on every mines. And usually in the afternoon at different times they would blow. The way miners, because they didn't work every day, they only worked when they had orders, needed coal or something, so they had a need for men working. So every evening, at number 7, the ticker was, I think, whistle blowed around 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So you listened for, everybody in the house had to stay quiet. In the yard or around the house, the kids had to be real quiet. That was the rule. Because Dad had to hear the whistle blow, because it blowed 1 long and 2 shorts. That meant come to work the next morning. If it blowed 3 shorts or something, no work tomorrow. So
Really?
If you couldn't hear the whistle blow, you didn't know where to go in or not. And so that was the way they communicated with the guys, all the coal miners in the area. And they all could hear the whistle. And every mine's had its own distinct sound coming from the whistle, because each whistle was designed a little different, with some of them higher pitch, lower pitch. And each one of them had a different tone, a different rule, so many long, so many shorts meant this and that,
Was there a certain sound or whistle that if there had been an accident?
Yeah, when it blowed continuously. If it blowed on and blowed continuously, well, it had a disaster.
Yeah, I knew that. I'd heard that the wives and children would know by the whistle, the tone of the river.
If that whistle started blowing and didn't shut down, there was an explosion at the mines, or somebody got killed, somebody got hurt or something, you know.
Okay, and the families could tell by the tone of the whistle
by the whistle.
which mine it was.
Whistle was Southern Communication. And when Allen's plant was built in Heron, they somehow retrieved the old number 7 whistle. I was somewhere around, somebody had kept it after the mines closed down, you know. And they put that whistle on the Allen plant out there. And Allen would blow every certain time of day, they would blow that whistle. It was the same whistle that blew the number, consolidated number 7. And,
Consolidated also had mines over in not Bandville, Crenshaw Crossing area too, didn't they?
Consolidated was a big company.
Yeah.
They had several mines in different areas, different towns around there. Johnson City probably had a Consolidated coal. And there was an awful lot of them. And I'm not sure who belonged to the coal mines in Brawlton. I don't remember the name of it. Ziegler had a very unique coal mining thing because Ziegler was a closed town, like a barricade, like it was fenced in.
Yeah.
And they had the company owned everything. The company owned the store, owned
Ziegler was a coal mining community.
And they had it locked in to where nobody could go in or out of town hardly. It was on by the Ziegler Coal Company. And I don't know who the owners was, but they didn't live here. They lived in Chicago or someplace, you know, that owned the mines, and owned the stores and the clothing stores, the grocery stores, and everything was owned by the company.
Yeah. Now, you lived on 10th Street when you were born. I guess that's where the family lived.
I was born
for all
on
of
10th
you.
Street.
And you guys, the school that you went to was the Southside School.
Yeah, there's I don't know, I believe there is a picture here of Southside School.
Yeah, is this one here?
No, that's a class picture.
Of the school itself?
There is somewhere. It was, I can't remember the exact figure of how many kids was going to Southside School. But at the time, there was, I want to say 1,000 or kids or something. Because everybody had large families, like our family was 11 kids in our family. So you can imagine the schools, every family had a lot of kids. So they was, they went and had, you could tell this picture if I could ever find. There's another old picture. Aaron shows Aaron with dirt streets.
Yeah, but concrete sidewalks.
Yeah, they look like they put it. There it is. There's a picture of the Southside School.
Oh yeah, this is the 3-story one. Yeah,
Yeah.
That's the third story. I think is where they originally had the high school.
Yeah, all the kids. They said when the school went out for recess or something, they would be. The school ground was just a mass of kids. I mean, it was a very unusual sight. And the funny part of it was that they kept the old school building after they built the new one beside it. Well, the old school building, you know, they condemned the 3rd floor. They wouldn't let any school in. It was only on the 1st and 2nd for a long time. And that's when I was going to school in the lower grades.
Now, what year was that about that they built the first?
They built the new school
Yeah.
in about 19 and, well, let's see. They had it when I was in the 1st grade. So they built the school around late 1920s, early 30s.
Okay.
Is when the new school was built. Now the old school was built before that, 1910 or so. And but they kept condemning the floors, you know, because of the rotting and everything. And they condemned the 3rd floor, couldn't use it, and then they condemned the 2nd floor and used the 1st floor. But they still left the building standing for years after we still. And then they finally tore it down. But it was the new building, but it was a record of around Heron, you know. Well, it was the only school.
Right.
And so they had a mob of kids. I mean, it was just unbelievable the amount of kids that went to school there.
Now, in this picture here, this is the front entrance. Does it, which direction does that face? Is that north or?
This was on the east side of the building.
This is on the east side.
And there's the bell tower. Now,
Yeah.
if you go into the library and you'll see a bell in that library, that's the bell that came out of that steeple.
Yeah, there's a lady that.
Lucille Howe
Yeah.
donated that to the.
Yeah.
She brought it to me and told me one day me and Lucille got to be pretty good friends, and she said, Bob, I would like to put this bell. Said Dean Pope ended up with it. Dean Pope run the cleaners in there, and he ended up, when they tore the building down, some reason he bought or snuck out the bell. He ended up with the bell. Well, after years had passed, like, evidently he got talking to Lucille one day and decided that he would give Lucille that bell, you know, do something with it. So Lucille decided she wanted it at the library. And so she would come to me and said, Bob, will you build a stand of some kind, you know, that you mount this bell on, you know, and with a sign on it, you know, telling what it is and where it came from and the history behind it. And I said, well, sure, Lucille, I'll come up with something. Well, I was a part-time carpenter, know a little bit about driving nails, so. But Eldon Wiswell, I'm sure you've heard of Eldon Wiswell's, the Christmas tree farm.
No,
Eldon was, he still has a shop over there in, off between 12th and 11th Street, North 12th, North 11th. He's still alive today. Eldon and me got to be real good friends over the years. And I asked Eldon, I said, would you help me build a platform for that bell? So he had a wood shop over there in that old grocery building over there. And so we got in there and built this one that's in the library now. That bell's resting in, is where that came up. And that's how come it come into the Heron Library.
that is cool. That story.
Now, very few people probably don't even realize how that happened. But Lucille talked me into taking care of it, and I did.
So when you went to school at Southside, was it the three-story building then, or was
It
the
was still a
new
three-story building then, and they had a outside fire escape. You come out the north side of the building, this side over here, you can't see it from this side, but on this side over here, they had a chute that you opened up in each floor, and you could jump out into this round chute. It was built metal. And you go down this chute and it slides you out to the bottom. You slide all the way down. Of course, you go all the way to the third floor. They had a big long ride. Second floor had a short ride. And first floor had a real short ride.
Yeah, probably had to walk out.
But that was their fire escape. It wasn't stairs. It was a chute.
Now, it's not a long walk for you to go to Southside from where you lived. It's just a few blocks, isn't it?
Yeah, well, it was 3 blocks. 3 blocks.
3 blocks?
Yeah. So we walked to school, and then we walked home for lunch and walked back to school over there.
Now, when you went to school there, you went home for lunch, right?
Yeah.
The classes that you had, do you remember your teachers' names?
Part of them I would, yeah.
And let's say for your, like for when you had gym, or not gym, but when you had recess, when you go out for recess, was there a lot of equipment, playground equipment outside?
Basketball courts, there was a couple, and there was ashes that come from the cold. Everybody burnt, well, we burnt coal at the school, you know, so that, I mean, it boiled it. And so they take the ashes and spread them out on the basketball courts. And they had basketball courts out there and played tennis courts, you know, on ball field and everything. And ashes was the thing that got you out of the mud.
Yeah.
But after you got home at night, your leg would be black up to your knee, you know, stomping in that black ashes. And then you come up You had to have your feet washed every day after playing basketball or anything. It was all outside ball, there wasn't no inside gymnasium.
Did the school have a baseball team or a basketball team that you competed with other schools?
Later on I don't remember what year, but later on, when they built the Lincoln School, they built the gymnasium. It had a gymnasium. It was the only grade school out of 4 grade schools in there, and you had South Side, West Side, North Side, and the Lincoln School.
Right.
And the Lincoln School had a gymnasium. It was the only one that had a gymnasium. So if you went and played inside ball, you had to walk. We walked all the way from the South Side School to the Lincoln School.
Which one of
Just to
were
play.
you on the basketball team?
Yeah, and I was on the basketball team then. And that was, then you didn't play back then. Until 7th grade and 8th grade had a basketball team.
So the individual players would just walk to the Lincoln School to
To
go
the Lincoln
play
School, and
for
when
the
you got
meeting.
done, you walked home. And that was it was quite a chore, but it was the only gym they had that was on the inside. So it was bad you could play, even when it was raining or anything else.
Yeah, I think Lincoln was built around 1927 or 28.
Yeah, it was built by WPA. That was the work program, that Roosevelt came in with it. Actually built it and everything. It was built under administration of the WPA. And the others was built by tax money, or for the community. But the Lincoln School was built by WPA.
I know you worked at the ice factory. Was that your first job?
Well, the first big job, I had delivered newspapers to, naturally, young boys delivered.
For the Heron newspaper?
Well, when the Heron newspaper had it, the Heron Daily Journal, I delivered them, and we delivered them. They was small paper, only 4 or 5 pages, and we delivered them on bicycles, around.
Now, did you have an area, a specific area in town
Yeah,
that you?
the certain streets you had, it was your street, to deliver papers. And then after the Heron Daily Journal sold out to the Southern Illinois, and then it went to a M something Finney had a contract with a lot of newspapers, the St. Louis Globe and the Southern Illinois and all kind of papers that they delivered, 7 days a week then. And then we went to bigger papers and different type of thing. Well, then I went from a daily delivery to a Sunday only Sunday delivery papers. And I delivered Sunday papers just 1 day a week.
For the Southern Illinois?
Yeah, for the Southern Illinois.
Okay. Now, how old were you when you did you give up that and then go to work for the ice plant?
No, right then, I guess it's that long in there. I had several jobs, of course, done mowing, for a little bit, 50 cents mow yard and so on. I think then we got into, I worked with delivering meat. A guy by the name of Bradley had an old big refrigerator truck that he went to St. Louis every so many days a week, picked up so much orders he had for meat, boxes full of meat, hind quarters, and everything you get to cut the meat, And I would meet him at Sheepy McCormick's store, which is where John Thornton's store is now.
Okay.
It was Sheepy McCormick back then. And I'd meet him there after school, and I'd go with him and help him unload that truck, and we'd make the grocery stores in town. I think 2 days a week.
So he would deliver to the grocery stores around there, the meat
Make a run
from there?
Yeah, and they delivered cuts of meat in wooden boxes, and then carry beefs on your shoulder, the quarter beefs and all that. And
So he had like a truck that was refrigerated.
refrigerated truck, yeah, he carried, put dry ice in it, and in St. Louis, he'd ice down and bring it in from St. Louis. And it was 2 days a week. I worked for him for a while. Then I worked for another guy by the name of Finney. I worked for him for a while. They're picking up trash. They had a trash haul, you know, that you picked up once a month is all they picked trash up back then. They didn't pick it up every week like they do now. They still, wasn't once a month was plenty.
I tell you what, it seems like most, or a lot of families would bury their garbage, because they didn't, there was very little garbage that they didn't.
Well, the cans was about the only thing they couldn't do anything with. Other than that, everything else was consumed, you know, or fed to the hogs or chickens or.
Yeah, I dug up bottles before,
Yeah.
where they've had
And
a
bottles
bunch
was
of bottles in a hole or something.
All bottles was sent back to recycled, you know,
Mhm.
all your bottles and everything. So all your soda came in bottles that didn't come in cans. And then one job I wasn't too proud of, not too many people done, but I did, when I worked for Finney, I had the only way you worked on this one, you had to go work at midnight until daylight, midnight to daylight, and go to school too. It was kind of rough doing this, but I drove an old truck that we went around and cleaned the outhouses out every night. Of course, I was lucky. I didn't do anything but drive the truck. I had an old guy that went with me that had a long handle shovel, and I drove down the alleys. He would shovel the waste over into the truck that we'd get a load.
From the family outhouses?
From the family outhouse, yeah.
Okay.
And we'd make our rounds, you know, we had certain territory to do each night, you know, you had so many blocks to do. And there was a Model A truck, no hydraulic, dump, just a lever that when you, after you dumped, you pull the bed back down and latched it. Then when you got a load on it and you pull the lever off, the bed automatically dumped again, you know. So that was a job that I wasn't too proud of, but it paid money, and the money was hard to come by. And so I did that for a little while. For Finney, I drove that.
What was Finney's first name, do you remember?
Finney?
Yeah.
No, all I can do is remember his last name was Finney.
Okay.
He lived on South 14th Street. And he had the contract with the city for cleaning up the cans, the back alleys, you know, and the outhouses. And then during Depression, well, then they came, sometimes they come out with what they call the WPA houses. They'd come out and dig a hole so big. And then they set a concrete slab on that hole with a stool in it, and a little building. And that you didn't have to empty. It just sort into the ground. So
Yeah,
empty
that's
a lot
what I
of it.
thought the outhouses were, that's why they.
That's what they ended up. But before that, it was just level with the ground, you know.
Uh-huh.
And everybody had an outhouse. You had to have an outhouse. And if you was rich, you had one that had two holes. And if you was poor, you had one hole. And so it was a double or a single. We had a single. And it was kind of comical. The old guy that I worked with, I have no idea. I don't remember his name at all. He was an old fellow. And he would get, once we got the truck loaded, then he would get in the truck with him and we'd drive out. We emptied in a field out there where Allen's Industry is now. In that big field there was nothing but a big field there. It belonged to Boren's, guy that owned Boren's grocery store. He owned all that land back there. And he allowed us to go back there and you go back, drive back in that field and dump it, you know, dump your waste and go get another load.
After it dried out, could you use that for fertilizer? Is that
Yeah,
what, was that what he was
it
doing?
lay there, just dry out, and then it would plow under. That's just a long time. That was one of the jobs. Then after that, I started to work for Miss Bert Griggs, a widow woman. Her husband was an old had an ice contract, you know, for a certain territory. And from the Heron Ice and Coal Company, Heron Ice Company, which was owned at that time by the CIPS company. And I worked there with her. I think we made $2 a day. That was big money. Saved enough money then to buy me a car. And We delivered mostly to Hafer, Energy, the outlying areas where his territory was. Each territory in town, you know, like North 17th, North 18th was one person living there. And then over on South 10th was another contractor, you know, that hauled ice to the houses. And there's the ice box set over there that's over 100 years old. That was what we put the ice in. Everybody had one of them.
Is there there?
Oh, right, one right behind him there.
Oh.
Wooden.
Oh, yeah, I think I have seen that.
That's over 100 years old, that one there. That was the first ice box there the Hardcastle ever had. And and everybody had one. There was a lot of fancy ones. Some of them, this one here was called a 50-pounder. You put 50-pound ice in it, up the lid at the top. Some of them had as big as 100, but some of the higher priced, richer people had over 100 pounds ice. They had one on the door was on the side, and you slide the ice in instead of going down through the top.
No, they had signs that was delivered, I understand, that they would put the signs in their window whether you wanted like a 25-pound or 50-pound.
Had two-way signs, 25, 50 on one side, 75 and 100 on the other side. And if they put the sign in the window, telling you how much ice they wanted you to bring in and put in their box every day, you could see it in a certain window, you know, every house, you had it. And then when if the sign was laying on its side, then they don't want no ice that day, so you go just straddle them by.
Oh.
But the funny thing of it is how people do the locks and everything today, you know, unlocks your houses. Back in them days, I went and talked in over because I worked for different ice companies, and eventually ended up buying my own ice company. This was one of my trucks there. I had two trucks. The time I was 17 years old, I owned two trucks, and I had a guy working for me that drove the other truck. And I had two routes. And we could go into every house. Nobody locked their doors. You know, they'd have to sign up, and there wouldn't be no way home. But so you just go in, you know, and take the ice in, put it in the ice box, and usually there, but on top of the ice box or beside it, they'd have 50 cents or $1, whatever ice they got that day, you know. The money was laying there. So, and you go in there. I went in every house, you know, nobody home, nothing. You just go in, deliver the ice, get your money, and go. And nobody locked their house. It wasn't no.
So let me just reiterate for here a little bit. Bob, you're 83 years old, and you were born what year?
1930.
30, okay, that's what I was thinking. And so when you were 17, that would have been like 1947. You owned two trucks and had two routes of your own. Now, you worked for the Hair and Ice Company for, I think, what did you say, 4 years or 6 years, I think? So, you remember what years those were, wasn't it?
Well, when I started with Miss Griggs' house, the ice, and we delivered hers.
She was one of those that delivered for the company, right? Okay.
I was going to school and working there because I was still going to school, but I'd work summers. That's when you're real busy, sir. Because winter they didn't buy much ice. They wouldn't buy anything. They could get by without it. You know, they wouldn't buy any, but such stuff outside, you know, and keep it cool and everything else. But in the summertime, so I worked summertime and went to school in the winter for the first year or two when I worked for her. Well, then there was a guy by the name of Wallace McGowan. The first guy that owned it, CIPS owned these trucks. They owned the whole thing at one time. They had a fleet of trucks. They had the ice company, they had the manufacturer. They manufactured the ice. They furnished their own electricity. And so finally somebody pulled the, what do they call that, monopoly law, and said you got to control everything. You know, you're not only manufacturing it, you furnish your own raw material. You got the delivery, everything. You're going to have to give up something. You can't have all that. So about 1945, I'd say, or somewhere in there, they made CIPS sell out something. So CIBS was smart. They sold out everything except they kept electricity, which was a common thing, you know.
Yeah.
And they knew which one to keep. So they sold it in 3 trucks at that time. They had 3 trucks running. They sold it to a guy by the name of Emery. And Emery bought the 3 trucks, and he run the route for a while. And he retired. He was old, and so he retired and sold it out to a guy by the name of Wallace McGowan. And Wallace McGowan liked the way I was a pretty good worker. I worked hard and I was dependable. And Wallace decided instead of hiring somebody to work one of the trucks for him, he said he'd take in a partner. Asked me if I wanted to go in a partnership with him. Well, sure, you know, but, well, of course I was too young to borrow money, but I finally talked my dad into sticking his name on there and co-signing for me so I could borrow the money to buy a partnership. Well, I worked 1 year with Wallace, and he says, "You're doing so good, and I want to go to farming. I got a chance to buy a farm." Said, I'll sell you the other half. You can have the other half. Well, I bought the other half too. So by that time I owned both trucks and hired a guy to work for me. And then the Korean War come along, and I got drafted.
Oh. Yeah,
I was single, so there was no way I could get out of going. So it was a matter of time. I knew I was going to get drafted. So being single and 18 years old, you know, it's automatic. So I took the job with the Army. I decided to volunteer. I got a better deal by volunteering instead of waiting to be drafted. So that was in 48. But that's the way I got started anyway, and I got in the Army, and I spent a couple of years in the Army then, and came back and left here and moved south to Tennessee and worked for TVA, building power plants, and worked my way back to Heron again, and ended up back in
Did you retire and then move back here?
No, I was a long way from being retired. I came back to Heron and was truck driving, done different jobs, worked a couple of factories, Allen's and Sangamo Electric. I worked there a little bit. And finally ended up with the post office. Decided I better settle down to something that had a pension.
I remember you saying something about
So
working at the post
I
office.
just said I'd just go into the post office, and I spent over 20 years then with the Postal Service. And then all my military time, my TVA time, Tennessee Valley Authority time counted as federal time, so I had 20 some odd years of federal time.
That's smart thinking.
But as of right now, looking back at all the guys I worked with in Heron, they was sort of, I'd never counted them up, but there was something like, Heron was split up in several sections. In each section, you couldn't get out of your section. You could only deliver ice in your section. And you did it every day, you know, and I can remember there was at least a dozen or more guys. And then you had guys that delivered Cambry and one number 9. You know, they had different territory. Everybody had a territory. They stayed.
How many territories do you think the ice plant had in the Heron area?
They furnished Heron made their ice plant with a capacity of 52 tons a day. Every 24 hours they could make 52 tons of ice, and they sold every bit of it. They sold it all the way. Benton came to Heron and bought ice. Benton didn't have an ice plant. The ice plants that they had when I was in the business there was Marion had one. Murfreesboro had the largest ice plant because they had ice down all the railroad cars with peaches. So they naturally had a bigger capacity ice than Heron had. Heron was second biggest. Marion ice plant was even smaller than Heron.
Johnson City had one too, didn't they?
Johnson City had one. West Frankfort had one. Ziegler didn't have one. Ziegler got their ice from Heron. Most all the other towns around, I guess the next farthest away was, I think I'm not really sure, but DuQuoin was getting their ice someplace. I don't think they had ice, but they had either Centralia or somewhere they was getting ice for another ice plant.
I remember reading that a company out from DuQuoin had bought the Heron Ice Company, if I recall it right, but I'll have to check on that.
It was good. But looking back over all the years, I was only a kid. I was like 14 years old, 15 when I started delivering ice, and then bought on up to, I owned 2 trucks at the time I was 17, and I was the youngest one. I was, every morning when we'd go back and forth and load the trucks all the time, because you had to make several loads, you couldn't haul all your ice every day. As soon as you'd empty one, you go back, get another load and deliver more. And I was only young when all these other guys were the older guys than me, quite a bit older, several years. And I look back now at, there was, like me, there was a couple of young boys, who were driving from Miss Graves or something, this summertime, part-time job. But according to the way I look back, if my memory strikes me, that I am probably the only one left that's still alive that delivered ice. I don't think there's anybody else alive that delivered ice from house to house except me.
And because of that, this is an honor.
Yeah, I think it's quite an honor. But I can't think of anybody. I'm not saying that for sure, but I can't think of anybody that delivered ice is still alive.
I remember that I think it's 150-year history of Williamson County. I think we were talking about the names of the folks that was in there, and you knew those guys that worked at the ice factory, and all of those are gone.
Yeah, and delivering ice was like, you knew everybody in town, because, you went in, almost everybody had an ice box. There was a few refrigerators in the 40s. Right after World War II, they started building refrigerators, but it was hard. You couldn't even buy one. You had to get on a list, They was trying to build so many of them, electric refrigerators. And they wasn't very dependable. The first ones that came out, they'd break down, and there was, a lot of people wouldn't buy them, said, I don't want that thing, it won't run, the ice I can depend on, the ice is there, but the other electric, when the electric goes out or it goes out, I haven't got anything, So when they broke down, usually we'd take ice and put it in the electric boxes, sometimes to make them work,
Mrs. Griggs is who you worked with or for, and where she was living and located at is the same place where the Burger Nook is right now, right?
That corner there, that corner.
That's where she lived there, so that's something that was previous to
her.
that.
Her and her sister, after her husband died, and her sister moved in with her, Molly, and her and Molly run the business in, but then they hired boys, or some men. And they also delivered coal. She had a 5-gallon or 5-ton truck that she delivered coal in the wintertime, and ice, and then a pickup truck for delivering ice in the summer.
Now, in a pickup truck, when I think of a pickup truck, I think of a bed in the back of there. Did you just put the blocks of ice in there, or was it a covered
No,
block?
just covered it with a comforter, like a canvas bag. It was canvas, but it was padded, insulated. You had it up front when you put your ice in, and you shoved your 300-pound blocks of ice, you could get, in a regular half-ton pickup truck, you could get probably 6 or 8, I forget now, how many you could get in there, the 300 block. Then you'd pull the thing back and lay it on top there, that'd keep it from melting as much as possible. Then when you sold ice, you pulled it carpet back, it set the insulator cover, chip off, you use your ice pick, you had your ice pick.
So they had the 300-pound blocks, and then if someone needed a 50-pound block or 25-pound block, you would just cut off that section that they needed?
When the manufacturer, that goes into another long story, I don't know if we got time for all that, but the way ice was manufactured, it takes a while to describe how they made it. But they made the 300-pound blocks in the plant. They hoisted them up 4 at a time with a traveling overhead crane. And they took them to a thing and dumped them. Then that's just a solid 300-pound ice. Of course, it was tapered so that the ice would come out of the thing, you know. It had to be smaller at the bottom and big at the top. So that, and then it had to be dipped so it broke loose from the metal. And then when you tilted the thing, it'd slide out into a runway, four blocks at a time to slide into a runway going into the warehouse. Then the blocks would go in there and they'd stand them on their end, stand them up so they'd take up 1/3 as much space. So but then when you ordered ice, you backed your truck up to the dock. The ice, the guy that works in the plant that collects off of you and collects the money, and I had a charge account with him. I didn't have to pay every trip I made. Mine was, all I had to do was sign the tickets with my company. I had it with CIPS, or with the company that bought CIPS out. So they come out of, they had a conveyor with lugs in it, and it's just a conveyor chain. And the guy inside the warehouse would take the blocks and lay them down flat again, you know, which are only about this high, this high. He lays them down, and they come out through the door, a breakaway door, come out of the warehouse onto this chain pushing that block. They have 2 saw blades. First 2 blades would saw it all the way down the end. That's halfway on each side. Thought about that deep. Then it would take the thing and lay it over. Then it would come through the other, they would have about 4 saws. It sawed them up in 25-pound scores. And then when they come through that one, then it would kick out on the dock and then you'd slide it on your truck. So that all you did was take your ice pick and go in that groove where the saw blade went through. And it cuts off your 25s and 50s and 100s or whatever you want.
Okay. One thing I wanted to cover, your family, your mom and dad joined the Second Baptist Church in 1933. I found that in some of the records. Your dad worked as, your mom and dad, I think, worked at the church in several different capacities there. And I know for a while, during the 40s, your dad was the janitor there. Now, you and I have talked about, you remember the church being physically, the building being physically moved from the southeast corner of 9th Street and Stotler to its current place now on 11th Street and Ford. Would you describe that what you remember? Because you were, as a kid, you remember watching them do that.
Yeah, I was just at the right age, I guess. I was in pre-teens, you know. It was how went to church every Sunday and also helped my dad sweep the floor and build the fires on Sunday in the winter, you know, and go around and open the windows so we get a little breeze there in the summertime. The church, and that's one thing I had a hard time explaining that with you, was that the church was a long rectangle building. I don't remember the exact dimension, but it was a rectangle building. And this was Stotler Street. And Stotler Street was what we called a hard road. Stotler Street had a single concrete pad that you had to pass one tar off of the pavement, you know. But that was a hard road. Every other street that comes off of that was a dirt street. Mm-hmm. And they'd oil them and sawdust them to keep the dust down in the summertime. This Stotler Street, just off Stotler Street, sat the church. The front of that church faced Stotler Street. In the back of the church was outhouse back here.
Were there 2 of them? One for the girls and one for the boys?
I'm not sure that on 9th Street what it was or not. They might have had one, there was 2. I'm not sure.
Okay.
When they moved to 11th Street, they did have 2, but down there, I'm not sure.
Okay.
But 9th Street came along here, and then alongside 9th Street was a ditch, probably 3-4 feet deep, 6, 8 foot wide, you know, just natural drainage. Well, the lot they was going to was up here on 11th Street. They wanted to further the church on facing the west. So in order to get this done, they would have had to make a turn here, and turning was moving the church straight. It's not a big building, it's not bad. It turns is where it works at. They would have had to make this turn here. They would have had to go from 9th Street past 10th Street to 11th Street and make another turn on 11th Street, go all the way back up here to where they wanted it, where this lot, where they was going to put it. Then it would still be facing the wrong way, so they would have to turn it again and then back it up and go on here, or come up 10th Street and come in and make a turn on 10th Street. So instead of doing that, what the guy figured, now I'm guessing, but I know this is right. They decided to move this church down that field. There's nothing out here, just an open field. There's nothing in there.
It belonged to George Harrison.
So you take this, they took this thing and pulled it back here and turned it around and headed up 4th Street, which made it was headed down the right direction. The front of the church was facing west, right where they belong. And all they had to do was get across this ditch. Well, they built a bridge there. They built 2 runners, you know, across the bridge, across the ditch, and they came across that bridge on them runners. And then when they got over here on the pavement, or the roadside, they came up the road right beside our house, but up to the church lot, which was right behind our house, the lot behind us on 11th. And then they had to move it sideways. So all they did was turn their wheels, you know, move the wheels around to where they could move sideways right onto the lot and put the church in facing the way they wanted it.
Bob, I want you to explain the method that they used, because I found that to be just absolutely fascinating. They had real large wheels, right, and they jacked the church building up high, and then they put this like a horse, or it's like a wagon of sorts underneath there where all 4 wheels could turn.
Yeah, they had these wheels was on, would pivot. They would turn any way they wanted them to, because they had to turn them a little bit sometimes, because they'd be wandering off to the side, you know, so they had to turn them once in a while to get it. But they had this, it had a big long, it had a big timbers, which that's what they worked with back in the days, you know. There was a big timber there that somehow these great big wooden wheels, there was wood, solid wooden wheels out of a big tree, you know, that they had.
And how tall would you think the wheels were?
Well, I was a little kid, so I was looking at them like they was as big as me, you know, seemed like they was as big as I was, and maybe they was. But I must have been short, maybe I was a very short kid. I would say the wheels was at least 3 foot tall.
Okay, yeah, that's what
with an axle going through them, with a greasy axle, just like an old wagon. And these beams, then they had big wooden beams that came through these wheels, brown beams, and went through 2 of them. You had 4 of these wheels on each side. They probably was tandem wheels. There was probably 2 in each corner. And so then when they could move these wheels, each one independent of the other, a little bit, you know, just a small. And they would take this beams and run. They would take these beams and run through there with the wheels, you know, back after they jacked the house, the building up, and then they'd run these wheels under it. Of course, just where they moved it to was soil. They didn't have a wooden paved road.
Right.
So of course they had to lay down boards, you know, for to roll it on, because it would have been sunk, you know, against
It was a slow process.
It was very slow. I don't remember how many days it took to do that. You're only talking 2 blocks or 3 blocks. It's 7 days to get it, just to do 3 blocks. But they put, when they started, they got it turned around, headed west, with the front end one west. They crossed that ditch, by building a wooden platform, you know, and place for the wheels to go in across the ditch.
Now, how they moved that, they had horses or ponies, right?
They had horses, but up in front, they had ropes, great big ropes. And out in front of this, they had a big round turnstile. Same way they would use it in a mold, you know, wheat crusher or anything, you know, turn a big rock. And they had some kind of pole here of some kind, and they hook a horse to that. And then another one over here and had a horse to that. And this rope would come in from the church, you know, from the front of the hook to the church, and it'd come up here to this, and then horses would go around. And then this would give them their leverage. The horses would they wind that up just like you would a reel on a fishing line.
Yeah, so you kind of just, they just kind
So
of wind it and they would pull the
all they
building.
did, the horses just walked around, which was real slow, walked around and wound this thing up. They had this thing anchored out in the middle of the road, which they blocked the road, you know, it wasn't no problem. They go around the block. And when they get to, when they set the pole, set the turnstile, they would anchor this thing so it didn't move, you know. They had anchored enough that it could come to weight, you know, and pull the church. And then they pull it, here comes the church gets so slow, they had to take this up, move it up the street a little bit, a few 100 feet or whatever they could go at one time. I don't know how far they moved each time. Anchor that thing down and go through the same process again and move it.
Keep repeating it, moving it up
They
each
stages until they got it up to where they wanted to go sideways. Then when they had to turn the wheels around going sideways, and they got a hold of it over here and anchored and then pulled the church sideways until they got it on the lock. That much I remember watching. Every day that was a challenge, you know, as a young boy, about 7 years old or so, or 8. Every morning you got up was watch them people move that church, you know, that was the sight for the day, the show, that was the TV for the day, you know. And we'd watch them move that every day, like that. But when they got up to they got this on the lot, got their church sitting here on the lot. And this lot had sloped down. The next lot to them, they bought this corner lot. And then the next lot to them, they bought it too. And it sloped downhill. Probably was a mine squeeze at one time, because number 7 mined all that coal in that area. And so it was a squeeze that it went down a little bit sloping. They come in there with horses or ponies or whatever they used. I can't remember now. Those small ponies or small horses or donkeys or mules or something. They had these scoops behind them, one-man scoop, you know, with 2 handles on them, like a wheelbarrow with no rubber, with no wheel on it, you know. And they'd go under that church on that south side. They'd go in and step thing in, you know, they'd dig into the dirt and they'd pull it up, then the horse would go around,
pull it out.
Then they'd take it down there in that low spot and dump it. They'd go back get another load. And they did it. It would get about the size of a regular wheelbarrow, the scoop shovels on. And they dug that hole underneath that church out, which they had it up on cribs, you know, on the corners that was all timbered up. And they dug that whole thing out. Then they poured their footings and started laying their concrete blocks and they put a basement under that church while it was still.
Yeah, which was served for the nursery and Sunday school classes, as I understand.
It was. They used the old cinder blocks, which they always said that number 7 mine. See, number 7 had its own power plant. It produced its own electricity. Didn't depend on CITS for power. And so they always said the boilers that they used to steam power, steam to turn their boiler, to turn their turbines, was the boilers really made a good ash out of it. They burnt their own coal and made ashes, and then they had to get rid of the ashes. Well, then old man Oldham, which I went to work later on and worked for them for a while, they bought these ashes. They was the best ashes it was. They was hard because the temperature was hot in that boiler and made the ashes real hard, almost hard as limestone rock. And so they used them and made blocks out of them. It was cheap because you could buy ashes. The coal company was glad to get rid of the ashes. Wanted to get rid of it.
And they call them, what do they call it?
Cinder blocks.
Cinder block, yeah, the cinder blocks.
But it was actually made out of cinders that came out of the boiler where they made their own electricity. And they said them was the best cinders to make blocks out of, and anywhere, any place they could buy. That was it. They was better than they get today, I guess. But they made all them cinder blocks because they was cheap, just a few cents a piece. And they put all them cinder blocks under the wall. And they didn't dig it deep enough, because if you was at least 5'10" or 11, from there on up, you had to walk around and duck your head down there because you were always bumping into something there. You had painted pipes, whatever they do, you had to duck under because they didn't dig it deep enough.
Well, Bob, I think this has been very helpful. I think we've learned a lot about how life was back when you guys were younger, and very much appreciate you taking your time. This is Bob Hardcastle, born in 1930, and showed us how life really was way back when, and maybe we shouldn't complain about all the things that we don't think we have these days.
It was sunny days back then, but, I look back on them now, it's quite interesting,
Well, yeah. Did you all ever go to the Egyptian Theater, or was that built after you guys were grown?
Egyptian drive-in?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Is it?
The world's largest screen.
Yep.
I knew the people that owned it, and I knew the guys that built it.
Was that while you were, did that go up while you were still a teenager, or was that after you were married, or?
It was way after. That was in the 40s. I don't know where I was working, and I think I was probably truck driving then. I think Alder was on the highway about then. Kenny Jolston was one of the carpenters on it, and Kenny, the Smiths are the ones that built it.
It's hard.
Irene and her husband, they built this school, they built this theater, and then they kept adding to it, and the guys just kept getting higher and higher, Pretty soon they got to measure, and they said, well, this is the world's largest screen, And it's held the record for a long time, being the biggest screen in the world, drive-in theater.
Well, that's pretty impressive there for their area.
Yep.
Yeah. I thought we just talked.
It's turned off.
No.
In your travels, when you were delivering meat, did you deliver to Kroger's store?
Yeah, we delivered to practically every store in town. There was a lot of neighborhood grocers back then. They was one, and I'd say must have been 15 or 20 grocery stores in there.
Yeah. Did you ever run into a guy named Charlie Van Soggy?
Yeah.
He was my great uncle.
Yeah, I remember Charlie.
And then my dad is on my dad's side. It was his uncle. So he was quite a character.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, there was a lot to be learned from them old guys, I'll tell you.
Yeah. Yeah, he
And
taught.
I picked it up more. I was a kid, but I was very inquisitive, and that's why I've done everything. I've been, like I said, I never once said I wasn't proud of being a honey dipper, but
I knew what you was going to say before you said it on that honey dipper. When you said you wasn't proud,
I
it was at
I
night.
wasn't a honey dipper, but I did drive the truck for the honey.
You got to drive the truck, yeah.
Now, what does that mean? Because I don't know.
When you go around scoop them outhouses out, that's a honey dipper.
Oh,
I
okay.
guess, I also,
I knew you were gonna say
along with all the others, I delivered milk.
Did you?
For Bob Brewer.
Not out of the same truck though.
No,
Oh, different truck. Oh,
I didn't drive that one. I had to do the run from the truck to the house with carrying the rack, with the bottles in them.
yeah.
And I did that for a little bit too. For Bob Brewer's dad, he had a distributor for New Era Dairy at that time, which is Prairie Farms now, but New Era Dairy at that time, and he had this place over right next to the Catholic school there in the corner.
Yeah.
And he was a good old, Bob's dad was a fine fellow. I mean, he worried about me because I go to work at 2 o'clock in the morning, see, 'cause that's when you deliver milk at 2 o'clock in the morning till time to go to school. And I delivered milk, run from the house to the truck, the house, delivered, collect the money, take it back to the guy that's driving the panel truck. And then at 7 o'clock, I'd go home, eat breakfast, and go to school. And at 2 o'clock in the morning, that got old after it all.
That'd start out old. Go downhill from there.
But that old man was really good to me. I'd walk in the morning, 2 o'clock in the morning. He said, "You had anything to eat yet?" And I said, "No." He said, "Go get you a roll or here, take a little bottle of milk, or something, chocolate milk." But he was really good to me. He liked me.
Well, I can remember my great uncle that I was telling you about. He used to say, and you might remember it, behind the CC Club, which him and his dad would go down there, and his dad would go in the CC Club, and he'd go outside and play. He was young. There were, I guess Lanzini had his dentist office. He said years ago there was a blacksmith shop there.
Yeah, hard
Did
to.
you ever heard of that?
Several different things there at one different time. There was a gut factory at one time.
Gut
That was a very, very interesting thing. I delivered ice to the gut factory.
for like making sausage.
No, all they did was take hog guts and cleaned them.
Oh,
Cleaned them out, washed them, all that, and packaged them to sell to packing companies. And they had several girls that worked there. They were mostly women, and they had to wear practically a rain suit, to
oh yeah. I
help
bet.
yourself fit in, look at it.
Yeah, I'm good. If you don't mind.
We called it the gut factory. I had, we just called it the gut factory.
Yeah.
And they'd use about 600-700 pounds of ice a day because they had a room that you had to slide the ice off of your truck down a ramp and then hit the floor, and then you take the hooks and drag it around on the concrete floor into the little room where they kept it, because they had to be refrigerated, them guts did, or they'd spoil.
Mm-hmm.
And that was one of the things that was there. And then Hard and Casey had a warehouse there at one time. And then Zini bought it after Hard and Casey got rid of it. Then Zini bought it and put his office in there and other offices.
Yeah.
But you look back on some of the things that you've seen, and a lot of people wouldn't know it. Do you know where the first television set come in town, where it was at? The Elks Club had it. I was delivering ice at that time, back in the days. Cooney Willis was manager of the Elks Club, and me and Cooney was pretty good friends. And they bought ice every day. I had the ice down the bars, and everything, the ice, all the beer down and everything, every once a day.
Yeah.
And I come in there one day, and he said, "Come back here, Bob, I got something to show you." He took me back to this big room, about as big as this room here. He said, "Look up there." And they had this TV, it was about a screen about that big.
Oh,
And
dang.
it was set up, just really couldn't see it. And it was so much snow on it, you just couldn't hardly make out what was on the screen.
Mhm.
And it was a bunch of guys sitting in chairs, folding chairs, and so they're sitting there straining their eyes trying to look at that TV.
Oh, man.
He said, "Boy," I said, "that's just the greatest thing there ever was, that TV." I said, "Cooney, you can't even see a picture on it." Well, it'll get better, They had a big tower, right off the building up there, 20 or 30 feet high, trying to catch St. Louis.
Okay.
And so it did, when the weather was just right and everything was perfect, but it would bring in a little better signal than you could see. So they turned around and I went back in there a few days later and couldn't even, come here, because I'll show you, they put a magnifying glass in front of it. I think it was only about this big, but they put a magnifying glass and it magnified. I said, couldn't all you do is magnify the snow. You know, trying to get things started. That was the first television set that I seen in here, was in the Hill.
I didn't know that. Was that back when the Elks was there in town? on
Right where back
Main
there
Street?
is now. Yeah.
I just barely remember that. I remember when they built the other building and they tore that other one down.
Oh, yeah. I remember all them buildings, I tell you, it just, cause I've been, and then I delivered mail for years. I think between the ice and all the other things I've done, I've been in every building and every house in this town, I believe. One time or the other.